So, Jonathan, just a real quick rundown on the folder. Inside the folder is what I call a graphic organizer, and I have 20. I think there's 24 classes total. I think something like that. But I have 20 in each of the folders. By the way, I need to give credit to my daughter, Sophie. She's the one that actually put the inserts in. She wrote, the words, amount of profits, and the letters, whatever they refer to. And on the back, I'm not sure if you noticed, there's letters on the back. I'm not sure what they refer to, but I'm sure it's refer to something. And so the graphic organizer is something you can use in each class. It has little boxes for certain information. The first box on the left is jots. You can't really see it because of the tab. But that's anything in class that you might want to jot down. Sketch, be anything pertaining to that class. Interesting tidbits to look up later, maybe. Miscellaneous, of course, it's up to you. And then math, if you want to input anything in the class that talked about based on this math. And then any big takeaway. And then if you just want to take notes, you can do that on the back. And then on each insert, there's on the first insert, there's a Old Testament prophet timeline with all the prophets. And then on the back insert, there's minor prophets and the regions they prophesy. Refer to those at any time. So, let's get started. We're going to have a little review first. No, wait. I added this later in the day. Thought question. Why are you interested in studying the prophets? So, just, why are you in here? My wife's in here because I made her. I think that's what she's going to say. Because I'm teaching, so that's why she's here.
That's why I'm here too.
Okay. Nikki's in here because
it's just something I don't ever feel like I have a good enough, even close to good enough grasp on.
Yeah, when you think of books of the Bible, when you get to the different books, people have their favorite books, usually in the New Testament. If the Old Testament could be Psalms or Proverbs, or it could be, the books that Moses wrote. But a lot of times you don't have a lot of people say the minor prophets are their favorite books. And that was me. When Mickey approached me 3 years ago on teaching an adult class, I said, I think I'm ready to step up because I never taught an adult class. I always taught either middle school or high school or middle school science when it comes to teaching of the school system, but I never taught an adult class, and I thought I was pretty excited about it. I said, so I think I can really do that. He goes, so you're going to be teaching the minor prophets. And I thought, I can't know much about that. And so, that Jonathan, same thing. It's one of these areas that I'm not or wasn't too familiar with. So I've learned quite a bit in the last 2 to 3 years. Anybody else?
Just like we said last time, the prophets are speaking on God's behalf, and so it's always relevant, but it's interesting to find the context of what they would have been living at that time.
Exactly. And it's not like the minor prophets aren't mentioned in the New Testament. There's all kinds of different places where they're quoted. Pretty important prophecies based on what was happening at the time, but also prophesying for the future when it came to who? Jesus. Our Messiah, Jesus Christ. Okay, so review from last class. You may use your notes if you took notes. What are some of the Bible descriptions of a prophet? Here's your choices. You have seer, servant of God, messenger, man of God, and watchman. And we actually went over some of these on Sunday. So what would be the answer here?
All.
Yes. They're all correct. All those are correct. And they're all found in the Bible. What was the work of a prophet? Called by God, received messages from God, preached and wrote scriptures, passed biblical tests. All of the above. are correct. What about this one? Which of the following are reasons to study the minor prophets? And there's the list right there. What do you think? They're all correct, right? No, just kidding. C is correct. This was for Mickey. Sunday, all the multiple choice were saying all correct, and then we finally had one that wasn't all correct. We had to go. So the answer, of course, is C. And then lastly, I think this one's a tricky question. What two ways were the prophets classified? First temple period.
Oh, literary.
Second, I couldn't pronounce that word very well, so Brandy helped me. Second temple period or oral? And the answer was B and D. So what do you think of? What do you think about when you think of a prophet? And I think I showed this particular slide. You had God at the top, of course, and then below that, prophet, who is God's mouthpiece or God's spokesman, and then people who should listen to God's message. Who wants to read this slide? Importance of Old Testament prophet.
In times of spiritual and moral repression and decay, God raised up men, prophets, in whose mouth he put his word and whom he sent to the people in an effort to turn them back to himself. Hebrews 1, verses 1 through 2. Long ago, God spoke to the fathers by the prophets at different times and in different ways. In these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son. God has appointed him heir of all things and made the universe through him.
So were the prophets only concerned about the future? No. They were not. I'll wait for an answer. What else were they concerned about besides the future?
Concerned about the immediate, the present reality of God's people and their sin, or God's people and their sorrow, but immediate reactions of God's people to his message.
So were they more concerned maybe about the present? And maybe even the past?
At times.
Were they always, were a lot of the prophets talking about past sins of Israel while they were doing? And how that's going to affect the present, but also the future as well. So, prophets do some foretelling. They warn the wicked and encourage the righteous. In fact, the prophets are not primarily interested in the future. The majority of their sermons dealt with the present and the past. Very little revelation was given about the future. They were more concerned about the past and present failings of the nation and the relationship to God and man. They focused on the lack of morals in society, which pointed to the problems. They focused on people's failure to keep the law. They constantly exhorted the people to an internal righteousness rather than a external faithfulness. So they were all about what?
They were addressing heart matters.
Right. Were they more concerned about the outside, their outside appearance? How they perceived themselves with other Israelites, but also other nations?
And they often said, this is what you think you look like, but this is what you really look like.
I think there's something in the New Testament that talks about this.
Whitewashed tombs.
Whitewashed tombs. Were the Israelites at this time kind of like that? The passages that forewarns of the prophets is, does anybody know the
Deuteronomy 18.
Deuteronomy 18, 9 through 22. Anybody want to read this slide?
Institution of the prophets.
A little more, Kyle, a little more now, a little more work to do.
Deuteronomy 18, 9 through 22 is a remarkable passage on the origin of why God commissioned the prophets. It stands as a warning to the Israelites who are about to enter the promised land. God was going to raise up men and put his word in their mouth. In the promised land, there would be new circumstances requiring further revelation from God. The land would contain people who claimed detailed knowledge of the future, but their sources were declared abominations by God. God would raise up prophets and reveal his word to them. Very good. Who wants to read? Go ahead, John.
When you come into the land which the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not learn to follow the abominations of those nations. There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire, or one who practices witchcraft, or a soothsayer, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who conjures spells, or a medium, or a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead. For all who do these things are an abomination to the Lord, and because of these abominations, the Lord your God drives them out from before you. You shall be blameless before the Lord your God. These nations which you will take over listen to soothsayers and diviners, but as for you, the Lord your God has not appointed such for you. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your midst, from your brethren. Him you shall hear, according to all you desired of the Lord your God in Horeb, the day of the assembly, saying, let me not hear again the voice of the Lord my God, or let me see this great fire, lest I die. And the Lord said to me, what they have spoken is good. I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their brethren, and put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And it shall be that whoever will not hear my words, which he speaks in my name, I will require it of him. The prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other gods, that prophet shall die. And if you say in your heart, how shall we know the word? How shall we know the word which the Lord has spoken? When a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord, if the thing does not happen or come to pass, that is the thing which the Lord has not spoken. The prophet has spoken it wrongly. You shall not be afraid of him.
And who wants to read this?
Now, this was John's testimony when the Jewish leaders in Jerusalem sent priests and Levites to ask him who he was. He did not fail to confess, but confessed freely, I am not the Messiah. And they asked him, then who are you? Are you Elijah? He said, I am not. Are you the prophet? He answered, no. Finally, they said, who are you? Give us an answer to take back to those who sent us. What do you say about yourself? John replied in the words of Isaiah the prophet, I am the voice of one calling in the wilderness, make straight the way for the Lord.
So who is this prophet that John is talking about?
The Deuteronomy 18:18 prophet that was foretold to come. And it's ultimately Jesus.
Now, the reference to a prophet in Deuteronomy 18:19 could be fulfilled by any of the prophets that God would send to the nation. Is that feasible? However, the expectation of the people was clear that God would send one particular prophet. They looked forward to that. When John the Baptist came, the people asked him if he was the prophet. John explained that he was not the prophet, the one that John was announcing, Messiah, the prophet for whom people were waiting. Peter connected the role of Messiah with the prophet and affirmed that Jesus was the expected. Yes, sir.
I think part of the reason why they might not mistake the earlier prophet, the minor prophets that we think of, is because that there is a connection to this Deuteronomy 18 prophet and Moses, that he is like you. And so there's an expectation that when this prophet comes, an exodus out of slavery. And so we're getting into a time when they might start to be thinking that. We're getting into a period of exile. And during the period of exile was when the question starts to arise, when is God going to send the prophet like Moses? And that is the reason why in John they're asking that is because they are poised and ready. When is God going to free us from Rome?
Do you think the Israelites, when Deuteronomy was written, and God sent forth prophets, not just the minor prophets, but the major prophets, that one of the reasons they didn't listen to these prophets was because they were looking for the prophet?
Well, one thing is that a lot of these prophets, especially the major prophets, they're not in exile yet. Same for Ezekiel, the writings of Daniel, but Isaiah, Jeremiah, we think we don't need a Moses. We're in the promised land. And even some of the minor prophets that we've already looked at my first time is we don't really need these guys. We've got everything we need. But as they get further into God's punishment of their sins, there will be maybe a sense in which they're going, maybe we do need somebody.
So before they were carried off to Babylon, they were kind of self-assured that, they're good. And these people that are coming to talk about repenting and doing what's right for God, they were pretty self-assured. It wasn't until they went to Babylon that things kind of changed their minds.
Well, not entirely, because Ezekiel reveals that they go into Babylon and they expect that God's going to send somebody from Jerusalem and rescue them. And he has to make them see Jerusalem's going to fall. And so halfway through Ezekiel, you get that message that the temple's been destroyed and they're finally fully distraught. There's nothing left for us to hope in except for God. And that's when the message of Ezekiel starts to shift to what God is going to do. I'm going to take the valley of dead bones and make them live again, breathe my spirit into them. I'm going to rebuild a temple, and it's going to be a temple of my glory. So even when they go into exile, they still have this self-confidence that somehow we're God's chosen people. We're not going to stay in this until all of their confidence is broken down. And it's then they can start going, maybe God will somehow reach out and rescue us. And the prophecies that 70 years, and then you will return might start to mean a little bit more to these people at that point.
Start to pay attention.
Yeah.
So which land was called the land flowing with milk and honey? Is it Egypt, Canaan, or Eden? Of course. The land of Canaan would also be called the Promised Land. The land of Canaan was promised by God to the descendants of who? And is thus referred to as the Promised Land. Then God appeared to Abram and said, to your descendants I will give this land, and there he built an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's home and from the land of my birth, and who spoke to me and who swore to me, saying, to your descendants I will give this land. Later, this land was known as the land of the Hebrews, also the land of the Lord, the land of Jehovah, the Holy Land, the land of Israel, the land of Judah, and there's scriptures for all those. The Canaanites were descendants from who?
At least D.
D is correct.
Also B.
Okay, I have a B, and I have a D, and those are correct. So Ham and Adam. Of all the places God could establish his people, why Canaan?
Partly because it was the place he promised their great-great-great-grandfather to do it. It's where he promised Abraham he was going to do it at. So it's part of the reason he establishes his people there. It It is a very wonderful place. It is the Fertile Crescent. It is a land that is extremely choice.
Lots of history there.
What's the history there?
Mountain Ride, all the things that went on there throughout history.
You speak of the Fertile Crescent. Is it still that?
Today, no, it's changed.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not at all. But the first 6 minor prophets I actually talked about the Fertile Crescent. I think it goes over to the Euphrates and Tigris River, and then it's a crescent. So you know a crescent looks like a crescent moon. Then it goes over to the Jordan River, and then it's kind of in that valley. I'm sure the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers are still pretty fertile, I would think, just because of the river, those 2 rivers. But as far as Israel, it's not very fertile unless they irrigate. They do irrigate certain areas, but I think the reason I did a big long search of the different reasons God picked Canaan, that particular area, is because it did have to rely on God for the rains, for the good weather. They had to constantly, have God help them with that particular area. And I thought, well, maybe that's why God sent them there, because they had to rely on God to make sure that that land flowing with milk and honey, because God provided that for them. So let's begin with this. Genesis 9:18 through 27. And who wants to read these verses?
Atlanta doesn't want to go. The sons of Noah who came out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham was the father of Canaan. Is that it? These were the 3 sons of Noah, and from them came the people who were scattered over the whole. Noah, a man of the soil, proceeded to plant a vineyard. When he drank some of its wine, he became drunk and lay uncovered inside his tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father naked and told his 2 brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it across their shoulders. Then they walked in backward and covered their father's naked body. Their faces were turned the other way so they would not see their father naked. When Noah woke from his wine and found out what his youngest son had done to him, he said, "Cursed be Canaan, and the lowest of slaves will be to his brothers." He also said, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Shem. May Canaan be the slave of Shem. May God extend Japheth's territory. May Japheth live in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be the slave of Japheth."
So does this help explain why God might have chosen Canaan, that particular area? I mean, how did Ham get there? Oh, by the way, what worldwide contribution did the Canaanites provide? Development of iron, development of bronze, development of alphabet, or development of chariot?
The iron.
Iron?
All
Nikki would not be happy. Actually, development of alphabet. So here's a question. How might the development of an alphabet help the Israelites? A, it greatly loosened the elite's hold on power. All Israelites could become more literate. The ability to write down God's message in ancient times ensured the writing for our warning today, and it gave the prophets the means to spread God's word. This is all. I think that might be another reason the Israelites were told to go to this particular area, because the Canaanites actually came up with the first alphabet. This kind of helped Israelites, with spreading the message. I thought that was interesting. So what do we know about the Canaanites before Israel entered the Promised Land? What do we know? They were very welcome to other nations, hospitable. They worship Yahweh. I mean, what?
None of the above.
None, none of the above. What do we know? Were they the major nation at the time?
They were somewhat of a confederacy of many nations. There were times when they were together and would fight a common enemy, but they also fought each other, and they had a plurality of deities that they worshiped.
Yes.
We know from the passage we just read, Deuteronomy, that they had abominable practices of witchcraft and sorcery and paints and whatnot.
So we can say pretty certainly that they had a lot of different gods that they worshiped. And they were probably a debased type of people.
Well, we know that some of the things that the Israelites were through the centuries told by the prophets of sacrificing their children and worshiping of idols and sexual immorality in worship, things like that. I mean, there's a direct connection that's made between not driving those people out and those practices kind of infiltrating the Israelites.
So who were the Canaanites? The Canaanites were descendants of Canaan, the son of Ham, the grandson of Noah. Migrated from the original home, the descendants of Canaan seem to have reached the Persian Gulf and to have lived there for some time. They then spread west across the mountain chain of Lebanon to the very edge of the Mediterranean Sea, occupying all the land which later became Israel. The extent of their land was like 144 miles in length and about 60 miles in width to the west of the Jordan. And roughly that area right there. Would you say? Roughly that area? History Corner. The Israelites had brought with them to Canaan the first, as far as we know it, in world history. What did the Israelites bring to Canaan? And it was the first in world history that we know. It wasn't iron. It wasn't alphabet. This was strange for a lot of the nations to worship one God. Would you agree? Very, very strange. The Israelites centered on the worship of the one God, Yahweh. This fact would have profound effects on history. Which of the following may have been an evil behavior the Canaanites practiced that came from Ham? Polytheism, oppressing the poor, base sexual immorality, worshiping gods in high places. They're all bad, but which one do you think would be more right?
See,
The base immoral, sexual immorality, because of what Ham with his father. What were the Israelites to do with the nations in the land God was giving them? I think Michael actually mentioned this. What were they to do? Drive them out. Anything else?
Annihilate them.
Annihilate. Give us the definition of annihilate.
Completely destroyed.
Completely destroy. That's pretty good definition. What do you think? The book of Deuteronomy, a summary of the law of Moses, gives us specific commands on what the Israelites were to do with the 7 pagan nations surrounding them. Chapter 7, verses 1 through 3 states, in no uncertain terms. Who wants to read that?
The Lord your God brings you into the land you are entering to possess and drives out before you many nations, Hittites, Girgashites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations larger and stronger than you, and when the Lord your God has delivered them over to you and you have defeated them, then you must blank them blank, no treaty, make no treaty with them, and show them no blank.
So you must what?
I'm going with mercy on the last one.
Destroy them
Utterly,
completely. I'm just gonna, it's completely, totally, I think it's the same thing. And Mickey would say, show them no mercy. So here they are, those nations that Jonathan was able to pronounce. That's why I let him do that. And I guess this would pretty much be the land of Canaan, even though there's other nations. Like I think, Kyle, you said that there was other nations within this particular land.
Well, they're the descendants of Canaan.
Okay.
But all of those, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Girgashites, the Ammonites, those are all, they're all their own nation. They're all their own identity.
Okay.
But they would ultimately be descendants of Canaan. The Egyptians were descendants of Ham as well.
Okay.
So, because Ham had Cush and Put, Mizraim, those were, so Ham, a lot of this land, all from Egypt all the way up to the north is Ham. And that also tells us a little bit about why, yes, they had a plurality of gods, but they had a singular God that was over everything. And his name was usually El, or something close to it. Baal was a perversion of the name El. So where did they get that from? Probably from their ancestors who had at one time held a monotheistic view.
At one time. Yeah. But not anymore. Not anymore.
And one of the things, sorry,
No.
what's interesting about that verse, Robbie, I think is, and it probably speaks to how fertile that land was at one time, is when God says every one of those nations he noted was larger and greater than the Israelite nation that came in. And I don't remember the numbers, but how many Israelites left Egypt was a huge number. How many ultimately made its way, after 40 years, made it. Anyway, I'm rambling. Those are big nations.
That's true. There's a lot of people.
A lot of people in that little area.
And the Jordan, it's a river, but it's not like the Tigris and the Euphrates. I think they get more rain in that area. The Jordan, maybe during this time it was a lot wider, but when I saw it, it wasn't very wide. In some places, it's only wide as this room. In some places. So again, I think at the time, God made sure this land was fertile and provided for, like Michael said, all these different nations, a lot of big nations in this area. So why would God want the Israelites to totally destroy the 7 nations? Wait for an answer.
He knew what their influence would do. Well, he knew what their influence would do for Israel, but he also had given them an opportunity to repent. There's a period of time where God is telling that the Israelites are not going to be going into Canaan yet because the time of the Amalekites or
Sin of the
Amorites not yet been completed. So God was being patient with them. There was going to come a point when he was going to bring judgment to the nations of Canaan.
So God doesn't just, give a nation or a people, a week's time to.
Israel was in Egypt for 400 years.
So 40 years then. Maybe longer, right?
Yeah.
We're going to find out that God, in some cases, gave the nations hundreds of years to repent. Hence, Judah and Israel. So it was frankly a question of destroying or be destroyed, of keeping separate or of being contaminated and consumed. Now, I know a lot of people today will use what the Israelites did to all these different nations as proof that there can't be a loving God? How do we answer that?
Gave them many, many, many opportunities. I mean, it's gotta be loving to give them so many, and they were so bad, and then they would come back, and then they would be bad, and he kept forgiving them over and over. I mean, he's gotta punish sometime. As parents, we have to punish our kids when they're bad.
Justice is loving, you know. Justice is loving.
And we fail to understand the nature of God if we think we can make a judgment on Him based upon what happens to humanity. The fact that these nations existed in groups the size that they were is evidence of a loving God. The fact that they were completely destroyed is evidence of a holy God.
The just God. So what happened to God's people once they entered the land of Canaan over time? What happened over time? Not the first week, not the first month, maybe not the first couple of years, but over time.
Become more like Canaan.
Okay, more like Canaan, right? Bad stuff, hence the minor prophets. This is a long verse. I'm not going to read it, but basically Hosea just basically highlighted desert the Lord, the Israelite people, God, and then people without understanding unto everything. They were without understanding.
Did you say they were minor in prophecy instead of major in prophecy?
Well, I think we said that minor prophets were small people. I think that's what we. So before Kyle goes, Kyle, these guys look familiar.
I don't know. I never worshiped.
I know that. But I hope not. But based on your,
Some of the Canaanites.
I think this is the main guy, right? And then we talked about Baal, and I think that's wrong.
Yeah, and some of these are different brands. Not all of the Canaanites would have worshipped Dagon, but some of them would have seen Dagon as their main god.
Okay. So this is kind of the hierarchy of the Canaanite gods right there, and then of course there's this. I'm sure if you guys. And the reason I have Y here is what's going on here? Trumpets, and then and why would they be blowing trumpets and beating drums? And what god is this?
It's either Moloch or Chemosh.
Yeah, I'm just going to go with Moloch. Yeah. So under which king did idol worship first come into effect with God's people? David, Rehoboam, Solomon, or Jeroboam? Under which of those four gods did idol worship first develop?
It was at least Solomon, right? He had wives.
It was Solomon. Actually, this verse says that he built a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, and Moloch, the abomination of the Ammonites on the east side of Jerusalem. Solomon did this. And we know what that particular god was about.
When you think about Solomon doing that, it's pretty hard to even comprehend.
Yeah, I have a hard time understanding how Solomon, what was the book he wrote? Proverbs? Isn't that the book of wisdom?
And he let his wives, which were not, they were from other countries.
Yeah, did he have wives from this area?
Yes.
From this area?
And they,
It just goes to show you that no matter how wise you are, you can always fall. It's pretty sad. Like when you have a face that wants to say something. Yeah. All right. I have history of the minor prophets. We're going to probably go over this history. We only have like a couple minutes, but the nation of Israel, or the Israelites, were under the kingship of Saul and David and between those time periods. With the death of King Solomon, the nation divided along tribal barriers. Roughly how many in the northern part and how many in the southern part? Oh, I'm sorry, they're referred to as Israel. I think other terms as well. Jacob, I think, is another. Ephraim. Roughly how many in the southern? And they were known as Judah. Let's do this. Capital in Judah was? And what about Israel? Samaria. Dynasties, 1, and then Israel had 5 tribes. I think we talked about Benjamin and Judah. And then the tribes of Israel were 10. Who conquered Judah? Babylon. Who conquered Israel? Syria. And what happened to Israel? Let's start with Israel. What happened to Israel after they were conquered? The nation. Oh. No return. Whereas with Judah, they returned to them. Oh no! Okay. I guess, one last question. See if you get this. How long did it take God divided the kingdom from idol worship to appear? 100, 10 years, 1 year, 1 day? Maybe not 1 day, but it did take 400. Thank you guys for your attention. We'll start on our first minor prophet. Jonathan, we are actually doing the last 6 minor prophets. And the first 6 a year and a half ago. So we'll start with Zephaniah on